So good evening everybody, and again we are back with day 12 of this initiative of Civil's Daily called Daily Answer Wars and Daily Answer Wars Prime. In the morning again we had given you a question in the Telegram group, and I think many of you have attempted it. I have checked some of the copies, and in this session we will be trying to discuss the question that was given, and again we will try to evaluate and give some feedback on the copies that you have submitted before 2 p.m. So let us start the session, and I think again the process of the session will be same, like first discussion, then you can ask your doubts, and then we will go for the evaluation and feedback. Today's question was pretty easy, I will say, because it was like from the static part. If you have read modern Indian history, completed Spectrum and all the books, I think you should have been able to answer this quite well. Otherwise, you must have faced some problems. It was totally content based answer because nothing extra or nothing like alien was there in the question that you should have failed to understand or something like that. So if you have gone through the modern Indian history and completed it, and then if you were facing problems, then I think it is time for a revision. Otherwise, I think if you have written it after reading it, it is fine, well and good. And if you have not been able to write and you haven't read it, then I will say that please start reading modern Indian history. So we will start the question with again the same format like introduction, body, and conclusion. First, let us see what the question was. So, question was about the role of women in Indian national movement. So, the history of freedom struggle is replete with the saga of sacrifice, selflessness, bravery of women. Illustrate through examples. So, basically, you had to talk about the women in the Indian national movement who showed their sacrifice, selflessness, and bravery. So, what you could have done here is write an introduction first, and then after that, you can just talk some points about how women showed sacrifice, how women showed selflessness, and how some women showed bravery. So, each of these 3 points could be used as the heading of your subsection, and then you could have written 2-3 points in each of the subsections. So, that was the pretty basic format of this answer. Some of you have written it as combined. That will also do, but if you can separate it, it will add some marks. You will get some extra points for that. So illustrate through examples was basically giving 2-3 points as examples in each of these sections. After that, you could have just concluded it in a generic manner, talking like mentioning something about our reverence for the woman and our expressing some gratitude about the role of the woman in Indian national movement. And I think that should have been enough. Now let us see what we could have written. So I started by talking about the role of the Indian woman in Indian national movement when masses were being mobilized by Mahatma Gandhi to peacefully but sternly oppose the colonial rule. A number of Indian women were quietly taking the center stage and shaping the independence movement from within through display of bravery, sacrifice, and selflessness. So I've mentioned this in this linking thing in the introduction itself to make it short. So the women took center stage in the independence movement, and I have talked that they showed bravery, sacrifice, and selflessness. And after that, I have gone to explain on one by one each of these 3 points. So the spirit of sacrifice displayed during freedom struggle. So now one thing you have to understand was that when you talk about sacrifice, it involves personal sacrifice, like giving up their lives or something very personal sacrifice. So you have to talk about sacrifice. When we talk about selflessness, it is about lifting or doing work for the poor or social work. You can talk about those things when we talk about selflessness, like taking care of the masses or taking some action which influences the which has an impact on the masses or the poor people of the country. So that will be selflessness. Whereas bravery will be showing bravery in the field of war or something like that. When in front of the enemy, showing bravery in front of them or in the field of war. So those examples you can use in bravery. So that was basically the difference between these 3 keywords. When we talk about sacrifice, it involves like the women who lost their lives. You could have mentioned their examples. Here I have taken the example of some freedom fighters such as Kanaklata Barua. She was a freedom fighter from Assam. So during the Quit India movement, she held a flag hoisting at Gohpur police station. Gohpur police station was her birthplace basically, and this police station is in Assam and was fired at by the police force. So she laid down her life at the age of 17 years with the flag lifted high on her hand. So it shows the sacrifice done by Kanaklata Barua. So you can talk about this Next, we move on to talking about Matangini Hajra. She was again a very strong-minded woman from Bengal. She was shot dead by the British Indian police in front of the Tamluk police station. Tamluk police station again is in Bengal in 1942 during the Quit India movement itself. So, being an active member in the Quit India movement and non-cooperation movement, she kept shouting Vande Mataram till her last breath. So, you can see that here women have sacrificed their lives. I'm talking about that. Aruna Asaf Ali, again, she is also pretty famous, especially during Quit India movement. She remained underground and all of and carried out many activities. So put behind bars several times for her political participation through 1930s. She hoisted the Indian flag on August 9 during Quit India movement. After which she operated for years by remaining underground while her assets were seized. So you can talk about these sacrifices. And I think since this is a 10 marker, 3 points each in all these three sections were sufficient. Even if you could have written 2 points each, that would also have done justice to your case, because this was not a 15 marker, so you had not the scope to write like 6 7 points. So 2 3 points in each section would have been sufficient enough. Now we go on to talk about selflessness in freedom struggle. Selflessness means uh, uh, doing something that impacts the poor, doing some social work, influencing the masses and all. So Umabai Kundapur. Now she was the founder of a society called Bhagini Samaj. So she set up one of the largest voluntary organizations during freedom struggle and worked towards increasing women's participation in public life and national movement. So after freedom, she refused offers of official posts, awards, and pensions and continued her social work. So this shows her selflessness. Like she could have accepted these offers, but she refused them and continued her social work. Next is about Rama Devi Chaudhary. Now, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi into joining freedom struggle, she would campaign village to village to convince people for joining the non-cooperation movement. She was imprisoned several times for her participation in the Salt Satyagraha movement and remained committed to social work throughout her life. So you can again talk about her. Now, Basanti Devi, she along with her sister-in-law Urmila Devi were the first women to court arrest for activities against the British Raj during the non-cooperation movement. Now, this activity also showed selflessness, like she herself went and quoted her arrest. So that shows that she cared for the society as a whole and not her own actions. So you can talk about her. Next is Rani Gaidinliu. She is also a very famous character from history. So she was a Naga political and religious leader from northeast who fought to drive out the British from Manipur and the surrounding Naga area. So this was about the selflessness of some of the women in freedom struggle. Next, we move on to talking about the bravery. In bravery, example of Rani Lakshmi Bai can always be given. She is a pretty famous example. So the queen of princely state of Jhansi, she became the symbol of resistance for women across India during the freedom movement. She died while bravely defending her province during the first war of independence of 1857. Next is about Bhikaji Kama. So she was not an Indian, but she was the first person to hoist the Indian flag on foreign land in Germany. She helped the revolutionary activities from abroad and was hounded and exiled for it. Next, we talk about Captain Lakshmi Sehgal. She was a part of the Indian National Army founded by Netaji. So she helped build the first all-woman regiment of Netaji's Indian National Army. Along with commanding the all-woman regiment, she also helped in treating the wounded prisoners of war and soldiers. So you can see that I have given like these examples are pretty famous. If you are writing in a combined manner, I think these 3 4 examples should have been there in your answer. Otherwise, a better approach would have been to separate all these three keywords and write according to that. So after that, we move on to the conclusion. So conclusion is basically, as I told you, just expressing our gratitude towards the activities of the women in the Indian national movement, like an acceptance of their bravery and selflessness and all. So I have written that it would be fitting to bow our head in honor to the acts of sacrifices, selflessness, and bravery shown by these and other women, many of whom remained unrecognized and forgotten. So you can understand that these were not the only women, but since the scope of the question is limited, like we have to finish our answer within 150 words. So I have talked about like there were many women who have remained unrecognized and forgotten, but they have also shown bravery during this mass struggle for Indian freedom. So that was it for today's discussion. I think basically this was a pretty simple answer. I will say if you have read modern Indian history, you should have been able to at least write 6 7 points or talk about 6 7 women, major women figures in the Indian national movement. So also I will suggest that try to prepare these topics like women. You can organize your notes in formats like you can write 1 or 2 pages on contribution of women. You can talk about education during the British Indian period. You can talk about the role of press. You can talk about role of civil services. So you can role of workers and peasants, role of tribals. So try to differentiate your notes into these parts and make 1 or 2 page notes on these topics, so that if these generic questions or these questions are asked in the exam, you do not need to spend time thinking over it or remembering things. You just have the content and you can start writing. So that will be a better approach, I'll say, especially about role of women, role of tribals and tribal movements, role of peasants, workers movements, and press, role of the press, and education system in the British period, role of education. So these topics are pretty important, and I will suggest that you can make notes and start like remember those topics, so that you can start writing whenever you get such questions in the exam hall. So after this, we move on to checking some of the copies, at, what all you have written, and let us see what all changes you all can make in your copies. Jefford, I will Telegram link is in the description. Otherwise, after the session, I will put it in the comment box. You can join it from there. Harji, good evening. Nisha, good evening. So we start with Avnish's copy today. So history of find the history of freedom struggle would be incomplete without mentioning the contribution of women. When most of the men freedom fighters were in prison, the women came forward and uh, took charge of the struggle. So this is fine introduction, but I will suggest, Avnish, that you do not need to mention that when most of the men were in prison, because this was a fact. You can talk it when you talk about Quit India movement, but this statement indicates that the women were not active when men were active. So that was not the case. It is not a mutually exclusive case. So women were active even when men were active. They had a lot of participation in civil disobedience movement. They had participation in non-cooperation movement also. So you can avoid this and talk about that the women showed exemplary braveness, courage, and also bravery, courage, and sacrifice. And then you can move on to talking about the role of women. So again, I think you have combined both the three subsections and mentioned it together. So let us see whether you have mentioned the points or not. So early struggles in 1817. Bhimabai Holkar fought bravely against the British colonel Malcolm and destroyed him in guerrilla warfare. Rani Chenamma of Kittur, Rani Begum, Hazrat Mahal of Awadh fought against EIC. Next, you talk about 1857 revolt. Rani Lakshmi Bai was the great heroine of first war of Indian freedom struggle. She showed the embodiment of patriotism, self-respect, and heroism. Okay, non-cooperation movement launched in 1920 for demand of self-rule. Sarla Devi, Muthu Lakshmi Reddy, Sushila Nair, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur, Suchita Kriplani, and Aruna Asaf Ali are some women who participated. I think Aruna Asaf Ali and all were more active in Quit India movement, so you can just check it out once whether their participation was at such a level in non-cooperation movement or not. Revolutionary activity. Famous group of the women revolutionaries consisted of Samiti and Suniti, Veena Das, Kalpana Datta, and Preeti Lata Wadekar formed an organization, Dhaka, Kamila, and Chittagong. Women shouldered critical responsibilities in India's freedom struggle. They held public meetings, organized picketing of shop selling, foreign and foreign activities, sold khadi, and actively participated in national movements. So it is fine. In your introduction, as I have said, you can make that change. And one thing you can do is you have mentioned some of the examples. That is good. But what you can do is mention some of the events. For example, when you are talking about revolutionary activities, mention 1 or 2 events. For example, why Beena Das was killed, or what steps did she take, or when you talk about Saniti and Suniti. So you can talk about some of the 1 or 2 events in these topics. So that, because in the question, if you look at it, it is given that illustrate through examples. So when the word illustrate is given, it is just not mentioned that give examples. So when you are asked to illustrate, you need to write some of the explain some of the examples, that how you have arrived at that conclusion. Like if women are brave, you need to give some example of that bravery. When women are sacrificing, you need to give an example of that sacrifice. So you can talk about that, give some events in all these parts. Otherwise, your example is good. For example, here you have talked about Rani Lakshmi Bai. So this is good. This part again, Rani Chenamma, Bhimabai Holkar is also good. But I think the last 2 points, you have mentioned a lot of women, but you have not mentioned exactly that. You have not illustrated what they did. So you can do that. You mention some 1 or 2 events, and that will be better. Also, one more approach, as I have told you, is differentiating the 3 keywords: selflessness, sacrifice, and bravery, and writing according to that. Because if you see in this answer, you have not talked about selflessness. Most of the points talk about the sacrifices and bravery of women, and that is pretty common, but selflessness is not talked about. So you can mention that also. So otherwise, content-wise, it is fine. Like you know the women involved in the Indian national movement, and just mentioning some of the events would make this answer better. Overall, I think 4 out of 10 is what you will get for this answer, Avnish. Next, we move to Manujans Answer. The freedom struggle, especially from 1857 to 1947, has been filled with contributions of women from various fields and various capacities, as illustrated. Okay, political contributions: Sarojini Naidu, first Indian woman, advocated universal suffrage, leaders sought march after Gandhi's arrest, Annie Besant, Vikaji Kama, Rani Gaidel knew Pandita Ramabai, okay, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, fine, Usha Mehta, fine, Kumari Chamma, Subhadra Kumari Chauhan is also fine, okay. Socio-cultural contributions, fine. So again, I think thoda sa you can what you can have done is like you have mentioned a lot of examples and some events have also been mentioned, so that is fine. But again, rather than going like this way, political and socio-cultural and like military, you can go according to the keywords given in the question itself. You can talk about selflessness, bravery, and sacrifice, and organize your points according to those three subheadings. That will be a better approach because for example it is not asked, the political contributions is not asked. So first Indian woman president of INC, so this point does not show anything like what has been asked in the question. This does not illustrate neither the sacrifice nor the bravery nor the selflessness, so this is not a required point, I will say. So although like you have mixed and written a lot of points, but you can, if you go according to what has been asked in the question, your answer will be more crisp and to the point. Like what they have asked, you will straight away hit on those things. In this manner it is going a bit like out of topic, and you have to write a lot of examples also. For example, here again in any percent you have talked about formation of home rule league. So what will you classify this under? Neither selflessness nor sacrifice nor bravery. So although these are important contributions, but this has not been asked, so that is why I'm telling you can go according to the question and write your points according to that. So that will be better, I think. Otherwise, your content was again, your answer is pretty rich. You have written a lot of examples. You can use these socio-cultural examples in selflessness. You can use the political examples in bravery and sacrifice, and in these Rani Lakshmi Bai example of Rani Lakshmi Bai and Jhalkari Bai all can be used in sacrifice and bravery examples. Major movements such as Swadeshi movement, NCM, CDM, and Quit India movement would have been incomplete without the mass participation of women. These women inspired the future generations and paved the way for socio-political upliftment of women in independent India. So that is fine. Conclusion is good. Introduction is also good. Again, just the body part you can organize or present it better. So overall, you will get 4 out of 10 Manujansu just because of the presentation. Because otherwise, your content is pretty good. Next, we move to Nisha's copy, the sacrifice, selflessness, bravery of women occupy the foremost place when freedom fighters were in prison during India's freedom struggle. So again, you can avoid talking about this, although this is a true thing, but this holds mostly for Quit India movement, not for the whole freedom struggle, and the question is not specific to that. So rather than saying that when freedom fighters were in prison, it gives an impression that the women were active only when freedom fighters went in prison, but that is not the case. No, Rani Lakshmi Bai was active in 1857 itself. So you can write a more generic or more broad example or more broad statement about women, that they had a very important role in the freedom struggle, and on the call of Gandhiji or even other political leaders, they were ready to sacrifice their life and showed exemplary bravery during the freedom struggle. Such things you can write in the introduction. Next, we move on to your body part. So early struggles in 1917, Bhima Bai Holkar defeated Colonel Malcolm. Okay, fine, this is good. So once again, let me see. Okay, so you have also tried to write all the points under one heading itself. So this is good. You have mentioned the events. Rani Lakshmi Bai also good. Non-cooperation movement 1920, Sarla Devi, who participated in. Again, what you can do, I think your answer is very similar to Avnish's answer. So you have mentioned a lot of women, but you have again missed some events. So whenever you are asked to illustrate, you need to illustrate that example, that how that example shows what has been asked in the question. So whenever it is asked to illustrate, try to give a bit of explanation. So whenever you talk about, like for example, Aruna Asaf Ali, you can talk about her role in Quit India movement, what all she did. You can talk about Sujita Kripalani's role. So these examples you can use to present the your point better. So CDM and the Dandi Salt March, women started breaking soil laws, forest laws, picketing schools, colleges, legislature, so etc. Sarojini Naidu nominated for Gandhi's Kamala Devi address meeting. So this is fine, like Sarojini Naidu, Kamala Devi. But again, in this point, you could have mentioned some events, like point number 3. Next, we move to your next point, revolutionary activities. Again, here you have written similar answers, so I think you can talk about the events particularly. Usha Mehta is fine with the task of broadcasting. Okay, the history of freedom struggle is replete with the saga of thousands of Indian women dedicated their lives for obtaining freedom to their motherland. So conclusion is again good. So overall, again, I will say that you can go according to the keywords of the question. Like you can talk about sacrifice, selflessness, and bravery, and arrange your points in that manner rather than writing all of them together. So that will make your answer stand out. Like you can examiner will understand that you have just mentioned those things that the question has exclusively asked. So that will be a better way of presenting your answer. And in these, if you write in this manner, at least try to mention some of the events in order to illustrate whatever you are writing. For example, in points number 3 and 5, especially, you can talk about some of the events that took place, and also selflessness point should be included. I don't think you have included points related to social work and all, so you can include that also in this answer. So overall, again, Nisha, you will get 4 out of 10 for this answer because there are some deficiencies which I just pointed out. Next, we move to Denise's copy. The history of Indian freedom struggle would be incomplete without mentioning the contribution of fine, they forget with true spirit and courage and for fixed values, torture, exploitation, hardships to okay, fine. Before it is 57, one participant in the freedom struggle began as early, okay, fine. Bhima Bai Holkar is fine. Many women, including Rani Chinnamma, is okay. Rani Begum Hazrat Mahal is okay. Rani Ababa, Rani Velu Najliar, free kingdom from British in 1780, fine. Okay, 1857, Rani of Ramgarh, Rani Jindan first, Rani did the response to battlefield. Rani Lakshmi Bai also good. Begum, again, I think you have repeated some of the points. For example, Begum Hazrat Mahal, I think you have mentioned here. Yeah, for example, you have mentioned here Begum Hazrat Mahal, and again you have talked about her. So try avoid repetition of points. That is not like not appreciated. They will not appreciate if you mention same points 2 3 times. Took charge of her, then fine, okay. Devi she had framed as a sniper, led Begum's troops against the female Dalit participants, Dalit Virangana, but in Jalkari by after 1857 revolt. So a lot of things you have written up before 1857. So you can see that you have talked about before 87 in a lot of detail, even repeated points. So and after that, what happens is the latter part of your answer you have to finish it within like 3 4 lines. So you can make it arrange it better way in a better way. After 1857, revolt is fine. Aruna Durga Bai. Usha Mehta is also okay. Aruna Asaf Ali unfurled the flag. Vika Dikama maintained any Besant and Sarojini Naidu, Rajkumari Amrit Kaur. So yeah, I think the main deficiencies of this answer are first point is conclusion is missing in this answer. So you need to write a conclusion. Always try to follow that structure of introduction, body, and conclusion. Next is you can go on for arranging it according to the question. In the question, it is given selflessness, sacrifice, and bravery, and you can arrange all these points according to that rather than according to the period of the history. For what problems happen in this when you are talking about before 1857 and 1857, a lot of space you are occupying in writing those things only, and the more recent events have been explained in very small or very like uh, limited manner. So what you can do is like go in that order and mention examples from all periods under one subheading. For example, when you talk about bravery, you can talk about bravery before 1857, bravery after 1857, and arrange your answer accordingly. And also try to mention a conclusion. So overall, you will get 3.5 out of 10 for this answer, Dinesh. One of the main things that has caused loss of marks is the absence of conclusion. So try to write the conclusion. So that is it for today, guys. I think I've reviewed some of the copies. If you have any doubts, you can ask me in the chat box. And again, we will meet most probably day after tomorrow. Tomorrow is Sunday, and also Happy New Year, guys. I think tomorrow you will also want to be resting because the first day of the year, and I think we will start again on Monday, 2nd January, and we'll move on with the answer writing and again pick up some topic. Which subject I'll pick up, I will decide on Monday itself, and we will start with that topic. So that will be it for today, guys. You can participate in the night owl discussions. I think that will also take place today for prelims and all. And also keep happy, be happy, celebrate the new year,